Okay, hello. And today we're going to be talking about how do we begin planning the return to work. We've got Lorna and Joe and me, Joe Moffat, here today. So first of all, what are we seeing any preparation beginning in your view, ladies?
Absolutely, I think. Oh, we're both going for it here. Yes, we've seen the CIPD have put out some advice, a big sort of comprehensive amount of advice, and we're starting to see people talking about it for sure. That's from my perspective. Lorna?
I think the CIPD stuff is excellent, actually, and I think it is really comprehensive. It covers things from lots of different angles, and I think businesses are just starting to wrap their heads around this. And I think the question is, what do we mean by return to work? Because of course we've been working, unless we've been furloughed. I think the question is, well, what is it we're going to do? And I think wrapping their head around that is where the thought is at the moment.
I saw some stats yesterday which were quite interesting, which said that of only just over 10% have got an absolute concrete plan as to what this is going to look like and how it's going to happen. 56% have got kind of loose sort of structure around what it might look like, and 34% are just beginning to start thinking about it. So people are in lots of different places on that, on that sort of range, aren't they, really? So we were talking, Joe, you said you've been having some flash forwards rather than flashbacks in your brain this week. So I'm going to start off with you. What have you got any thoughts about what the future world of work after after lockdown looks like?
Yeah, I mean, laughing about I flash forwards, it was just my way of talking about a flashback, apart from it's about the future. It's sort of 6 weeks in, and I'm in a fairly privileged position in terms of my situation, and the first couple of weeks was quite scary, for everybody, and then things sort of settled down, and now I'm starting to have these moments of worry about what's coming. How long is it going to go on for? What happens at the end of it? How does it all sort of go from there? And I'm not, responsible for hundreds of employees and needing to think about, how to get the business going again and bringing people back to work and ending the furlough and all of that sort of stuff. So, I just can't even imagine how people are currently feeling in situations where they're HR and leaders in organisations and thinking about the future. Because again, we haven't even got a beginning for the future. So we're sort of speculating on when we need to start doing these things or what we need to do and when anyway. So that makes it more difficult.
There was some stuff, wasn't there, in the press this week, Lorna, about, I think Barclays were talking about their scoping out what the future might look like, and where that might go for massive head office organisations and structures.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's really forced us to look at what we think about as work, as the work environment, as how work gets done. Lots of myths have been busted over the past 5 or 6 weeks in terms of what working from home could look like and what it means for productivity and output and trust. I think people have rediscovered, what a little bit of employee trust can do.
Yeah.
And I think it's not an either or, is it? It's not we're all back in the office or we're all working from home. It's really forcing organisations to look at what do we mean by flexible working, and flexible working is really being able to work how and where and when works best for you to get the best out of you. And I think that's what was really interesting about the Barclays and WPP examples. And I know WPP and Barclays do quite a lot of flexible working, but I think it's just really pushed the envelope. There are people who've taken, put their call centre teams working remotely now, and I've done some work in the past with businesses who wanted to have call centre teams working remotely, and I've done some work with businesses where they were just adamant that would never work, and we're now seeing lots of opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We've spent the last X number of years closing down regional offices, closing down branch structures, closing down the dispersed workforces in small groups, pushing everyone into these sort of super centres, massive head office complexes, and now we're kind of almost reverting back to a post going up further than pre-lockdown and going even further back. But so as we begin planning, what advice would you have for people as they're starting, whether they're leaders, HR, comms people? What are the kind of key things we need to take into account as we start thinking about what this future, which we don't know when it will be, ought to look like?
I think the primary thing.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Jo.
Oh, you don't know. You
Primary
go.
too, which has obviously got the same thought in our head at the same time. This is a change project. This is a big change project. This isn't just undoing stuff that we've done over the past 5 or 6 weeks. This is rebuilding how we want work and organisations to be. And so treating it as such, including maybe having an executive sponsor who drives it and holds people to account, is probably the place you might want to start.
Okay, Jo, what were you going to say?
Just with a really strong emphasis on individual involvement. We talk about employee voice within the Engage Success movement, and this is a real moment where that is absolutely necessary, because, as you said, the way that we've worked has changed over the years, and we've put people into particular structures. We've done a lot with open plan offices, thinking that was going to help our productivity, and in lots of cases it hasn't, and lots of people don't like it. Now we've had people working from home and demonstrating, as you said, Lorna, whether they can be productive, and that they can get the same work done, or albeit within the sort of constraints of being in quite a scary place at the moment, I guess.
So can I just
you've got people. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just, when we're listening to employee voice in this kind of situation, is this asking in kind of broad sweet pulse type things, how do you want your future world to look like, or is it one-to-one conversations? Is this going down to sort of local team level? How's this best approached, would you say, Jo?
I think it's got to be a combination of all of it, really, because people have different perspectives for different reasons at different times around different processes, if you like. The fundamental one-to-one level, we've got people. I was just saying about my husband. He's been working from home for 6 weeks. He could work from home. He's IT. It seems to be working well. He hates it. He wants to go back to the office. He's wanted to go back to the office every day since he's been at home.
Maybe that's saying something about. Well, no, let's
about me. Yeah, exactly. But actually, I personally think he's much more relaxed, and he's actually benefited from being at home, but he wants to be in the office. So he would have a different view if it was me, because I love working from home. If it was me, I wouldn't be wanting to go back in the office. I'd be wanting to carry on working from home. And if we were doing the same job, we could both do that job from those 2 different places. It's perfectly possible. We've proved it. So I think it's got to be about the business processes and what's needed for customers and for ease of getting things done. But actually individual needs need to come in. We've talked about flexible working for years, and people have always thought it was about if you've got children, and people would say, oh, it's about having elderly parents you want to care for, and there were other things that started to come in, but actually nobody really. I saw a headline yesterday about will shared parental leave ever work, and I think now all of the stuff around flexibility, the whole piece, there's an opportunity to really look at all of that. But you've got to talk to individuals, because it's different for everyone, as we know.
So you were suggesting, Lorna, a worthwhile, must treat this as a major change project. I mean, clearly it's much bigger almost, isn't it, than the one we did a few weeks ago when we introduced lockdown. I mean, it's massive. So an executive sponsor, listening to employee voice, treating people as individuals. What else would you add to that, Lorna?
So I think, to build off of Jo's point, inclusion and involvement in this is really key. One approach that actually I think could work quite well is appreciative inquiry, which is where you go out and you say what works, what's good, what do we want to hang on to, what do we want to build on, because it focuses people to look at what they do want and go from there. And it's a really inclusive approach, and it can work in one-to-ones, it can work in groups. It's really flexible. I think the other thing is that bear in mind that there are going to be lots of groups in the organisation who are going to have a stake in this. Probably the primary group where you were probably thinking about starting is OC Health and Health and Safety, particularly if you're not in a white collar environment. If you've got a lot of blue collar employees and you're trying to figure out how do we get social distancing to work while getting the shop floor back up and running, Health and Safety and OC Health will be at the core of that, and HR, internal communications, operations, all of those teams have to really work so well together, which is why I think it is a change project. And I think doing that, pulling them together, listening to employees from the ground, really gathering their feedback, and remembering that communication is two-way. It's a loop, it's a continuous loop.
Yes, yes.
And let's not forget that in the first instance, we've got people who have got some real sort of mental health issues around what's happened, the fact that they've been sort of kept at home even though they didn't want to be in lots of cases. Some people will have had deaths in their family, and you know, all of that stuff will be happening right at the beginning as well. So it's not as simple as, you know, change programs where we say we're going to move from here to here, and clearly they're not simple, but you know, we've got all the additional sort of emotional stuff that's going, complexities and around it. Yeah, exactly.
And as you say, individualities, you know, people who might not be able to go back to work because they're shielding vulnerable people in their household, or whatever that might be. So
I think everyone is bringing, and if there's one thing that we can take out of the past 6 weeks, I would hope that it's organisations are recognising, you know, that we are human at heart, and we feel all those emotions, and we've got all those needs, and we are all of these multifaceted roles that we play, and they all come to bear in the workplace. And just pretending that's not the case because lockdown might be dialing down a little bit would be a real lost opportunity. So I completely agree, Jo, which is why that inclusion and involvement piece is so important, because I might be grieving, you might be desperate to get back and, you know, raring to go. You don't know until you listen to people. And I think the other thing, it really struck me when I was speaking to a guy that I think you and I both know, Jo, Ian Eyston, who's doing his doctorate on neurodiversity in the workplace. And I think if you think about inclusion, you know, I'm seeing lots of statistics that are saying lots of disabled groups are saying, finally, you're figuring out that we can do this work, and we don't have to be physically in a workplace doing it.
That's
so
interesting.
You've got such an opportunity for your true diversity and inclusion agenda to kick off here.
So let's look at this as it is a massive opportunity to shape the world of work to how we want it to be, and that works for everybody. I think that's, lovely. Thank you, ladies. That's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.